You wake up one morning and nothing is technically wrong. Your bills are paid. Your phone is charged. The world outside your window moves with its usual rhythm. People hurry to work. Coffee shops fill with conversations. News alerts arrive before you've even taken your first sip of water. And yet something inside you feels strangely unwelcome. Not hated. Not attacked. Just dismissed. It's a feeling that's difficult to explain because it doesn't leave bruises. No one points a finger. No one tells you that you don't belong. Instead, your questions are met with polite smiles. Your hesitation is mistaken for weakness. Your desire to slow down is treated like an inconvenience in a civilization obsessed with speed. You begin to wonder if wisdom itself has become an obstacle. When was the last time you felt that? That quiet sensation that you're living in the wrong tempo. Not because you're behind, but because everyone else seems desperate to run towards something they haven't stopped to examine. There's a peculiar loneliness that comes with seeing too much. Not intelligence, not knowledge. Seeing how trends replace convictions. Seeing how outrage spreads faster than understanding. Seeing how certainty has become more valuable than curiosity. And perhaps most unsettling of all, seeing people celebrate systems that quietly drain away the very things that make us human. The strange part is that history has visited these crossroads before. Long before smartphones, before artificial intelligence, before algorithms learned how to predict our desires, civilization discovered something uncomfortable. The moments of greatest technological confidence often carried the deepest spiritual uncertainty. Ancient Rome expanded its roads, perfected its engineering, and accumulated unimaginable wealth. Yet many of its greatest thinkers wrote not about triumph, but about inner decay. They noticed that abundance could create emptiness, just as easily as it created comfort. The Greek philosophers walked through marketplaces overflowing with trade, while asking questions that merchants could not answer. What makes a good life? What kind of person are you becoming? How much of your identity belongs to you, and how much has been borrowed from the crowd? Those questions survived empires because they were never really about Rome or Athens. They were about us. Every generation believes its challenges are unprecedented. Every generation thinks history has finally reached a point where the old wisdom no longer applies. Then history smiles. Because human beings continue making new mistakes with ancient minds. Our ancestors feared being exiled from the tribe because isolation once meant death. Today the tribe fits inside a screen. The danger, however, remains astonishingly similar. To be ignored, to be excluded, to become invisible. Our nervous systems evolved in forests and villages where social rejection carried immediate consequences. Thousands of years later, those same neural circuits are activated by disappearing messages, declining engagement, and silent feeds. The brain doesn't always distinguish between physical threats and social ones. Contempt registers in remarkably similar ways. Not loud hostility, quiet dismissal. That subtle feeling that your existence barely leaves a ripple. Modern neuroscience has revealed something fascinating. The human brain constantly predicts its environment, rather than merely reacting to it. Every experience becomes a lesson about what to expect next. Every interaction slightly reshapes the model your mind builds about reality. Now think about what happens when millions of tiny interactions whisper the same message. Faster, produce more. Respond immediately. Don't hesitate, don't question, optimize everything. Gradually, without noticing, your internal model begins treating contemplation as danger. Stillness feels unproductive. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Reversion starts looking like failure. And suddenly the wisest parts of yourself, the parts that require patience, uncertainty, and deep attention, begin to feel almost illegal. Not because anyone outlawed them, because the culture quietly stopped rewarding them. Have you ever caught yourself reaching for your phone without knowing why? Not because someone contacted you. Not because you needed information. Simply because your mind could no longer tolerate 10 seconds without stimulation. That tiny moment reveals something enormous. Attention has become one of the most contested resources in human history. Entire industries compete for it. Sophisticated algorithms learn your emotional triggers better than many of your closest friends ever will. They don't necessarily understand you as a person. They understand you as a pattern. Portals can be predicted. Predictions can be monetized. And somewhere inside that process, something almost invisible begins to happen. Your curiosity slowly transforms into consumption. Questions become products. Identity becomes performance. Even your outrage begins feeling strangely rehearsed. This isn't the result of some grand conspiracy. It's something far more unsettling. It's the natural consequence of systems designed to maximize engagement, rather than understanding. Systems don't wake up in the morning intending to make people shallow. They simply reward whatever keeps attention moving. Over time, human behavior adapts. Psychologists sometimes describe this as reinforcement. Behaviors followed by rewards become easier to repeat. The remarkable thing is that the rewards don't have to be meaningful. They only have to be immediate. A notification, a compliment, a brief sense of being noticed. Our ancestors searched for food. Modern humans often search for confirmation. The difference seems small until you realize confirmation can become addictive. You stop asking whether something is true. You start asking whether it will be accepted. Slowly, almost invisibly, the center of gravity shifts from reality to approval. Carl Jung spent much of his life exploring the masks people wear. He believed every society encourages individuals to develop a public identity, a version of themselves capable of functioning within social expectations. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. We all play roles, friend, professional neighbor. The danger appears that when the mask grows stronger than the face beneath it, when performance replaces authenticity, when external validation becomes the only language your inner life understands. Today, those masks can't be updated every few minutes, curated, edited, measured. We don't simply present ourselves anymore. We continuously optimize ourselves for invisible audiences. And perhaps that's why so many people feel exhausted, despite doing less physical labor than almost any generation before them. Maintaining a digital identity demands emotional energy. Protecting an image requires constant surveillance. Every opinion feels permanent. Every mistake appears searchable. Every silence risks being interpreted. The irony is heartbreaking. We've become more connected than ever while privately wondering whether anyone actually sees us. Not our profiles, not our accomplishments, not our carefully assembled opinions. Use the version that exists when the screens go dark. The version that still wonders whether slowing down might actually reveal something we've forgotten. History suggests that civilizations rarely collapse overnight. More often, they drift. People continue building, trading, inventing and celebrating while gradually losing the ability to recognize what truly deserves their attention. The most dangerous transformations are rarely dramatic. They arrive disguised as convenience, one shortcut, then another, until eventually no one remembers what the longer path was protecting. And that raises an unsettling possibility. What if the greatest challenge of the years ahead won't be keeping up with technology? What if it will be protecting the parts of yourself that technology cannot measure? Because there is a profound difference between becoming more efficient and becoming more awake. One makes life faster. The other makes it meaningful. The tragedy is that they don't always grow together. Sometimes they move in opposite directions. And if that's true, then perhaps the people most likely to struggle in the years ahead won't be the least informed. They'll be the ones who still insist on asking inconvenient questions before accepting comfortable answers. The uncomfortable truth is that contempt rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive wearing the face of open hostility. It doesn't slam doors or raise its voice. More often, it appears as indifference, a shrug, a passing glance, a conversation that quietly moves on without making room for the one person asking a deeper question. That is what makes it so dangerous. Human beings can survive conflict. We have endured wars, disasters, and unimaginable hardship. But being treated as though your thoughts no longer matter reaches into a different part of the psyche. It whispers that your way of seeing the world has become obsolete. And that whisper is becoming surprisingly common. Look around, and you'll notice an invisible race taking place. Everyone seems to be competing for attention, for certainty, for relevance. Every headline promises urgency. Every platform rewards immediate reactions. Every conversation seems to demand that you choose a side before you've even had time to understand the question. Reflection begins to look suspicious. Patience starts feeling like weakness. Nuance becomes mistaken for indecision. The tragedy isn't simply that people disagree more. It's that fewer people are willing to stay with uncertainty long enough for wisdom to emerge. Our brains weren't built for this environment. For most of human history, information arrived slowly. News traveled at the speed of horses, ships, or footsteps. A single idea could take years to spread across continents. That pace gave communities something we've almost forgotten. Time to absorb reality before reacting to it. Today, reality barely has time to happen before it's interpreted. Before an event is fully understood, millions of opinions are already competing to define it. Facts become less important than narratives. Confidence becomes more persuasive than evidence. The human mind struggles under that weight. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as an energy-saving machine. It constantly searches for shortcuts, because careful thinking requires enormous effort. Faced with endless information, it naturally begins relying on mental habits. It groups people into categories, accepts familiar stories, and filters out anything that threatens its existing worldview. None of this makes us foolish. It makes us human. The problem begins when systems built around speed encourage those shortcuts instead of challenging them. Every click teaches the algorithm what you already believe. Every recommendation gently nudges you toward more of the same. Without realizing it, your world becomes smoother, more predictable, and strangely smaller. You stop encountering ideas that force you to grow, not because they're unavailable, because no longer appear. It's an invisible architecture shaping your perception one recommendation at a time. That should make all of us pause, because freedom has always depended on something deeper than the ability to choose between options. Real freedom depends on the ability to recognize that other options exist. Throughout history, societies have developed comforting myths about themselves. Ancient kingdoms believed the gods guaranteed their permanence. Empires convinced themselves they represented the final stage of civilization. Generations before us assumed history naturally bent toward progress, as though each new invention automatically produced wiser human beings. History has never been that generous. The printing press expanded knowledge. It also spread propaganda. Industrialization created prosperity. It also created alienation. The internet connected billions. It also made loneliness easier to hide. Every revolutionary tool amplifies human nature before it transforms it. Technology doesn't erase our deepest instincts. It gives them new costumes. Perhaps that's why the oldest philosophical traditions continue speaking to modern life with surprising clarity. The Stoics never worried about smartphones. Buddhist monks never debated social media. Yet both understood something timeless. Suffering often begins the moment we confuse what we can control with what we cannot. External approval has always belonged to the second category. So has public opinion. So has reputation. Yet modern culture encourages us to build our identities almost entirely around those fragile foundations. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mood can change because of something someone else didn't say? Not an insult, not criticism, silence. A message left unanswered. An invitation that never arrived. A compliment given to someone else. The human imagination fills empty spaces with remarkable creativity. Psychologists call this negative interpretation bias. When information is incomplete, our minds often complete the story using fear rather than evidence. That ancient survival mechanism once protected us from hidden dangers. Today, it quietly sabotages our peace. We begin assuming rejection where there was simply distraction. We mistake algorithms for personal judgment. We internalize statistical probabilities as statements about our worth. The result is a society filled with people carrying invisible emotional burdens that no one else can see. Then something even stranger happens. The harder people feel ignored, the louder they become. Conversations stop being opportunities for understanding and become performances of certainty. Listening becomes a strategic pause before speaking again. Outrage becomes social currency. The loudest voice wins, not because it's wiser, but because it occupies more psychological space. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that societies often become uncomfortable around individuals who refuse to follow familiar patterns. Not necessarily because those individuals are wrong, but because they expose assumptions everyone else has stopped questioning. Every age develops its own invisible rules. Not laws, expectations. Rules about what success should look like, how happiness should appear, what ambition should sound like. And perhaps most importantly, what should never be questioned. Breaking those unwritten rules doesn't always lead to persecutions. Sometimes it leads to something quieter. People simply stop taking you seriously. They smile politely. They change the subject. They continue walking as though your questions belong to another era. That kind of dismissal is difficult to defend against, because it leaves no evidence. No one can point to a single moment when it happened, yet somehow you feel it. You begin editing your own thoughts before sharing them. You simplify complex ideas so they'll fit into conversations that no longer have patience for complexity. Eventually, you may even censor yourself before anyone else has the chance. The philosopher within you slowly falls silent, not because it disappeared, because it became exhausted. This is where modern neuroscience offers a surprising insight. The brain is remarkably adaptable. Every repeated behavior strengthens certain neural pathways while allowing others to weaken. Attention is like water flowing through a landscape. The more often it follows one path, the deeper that path becomes. Spend enough years reacting instantly, and patience becomes unfamiliar. Spend enough years chasing approval, and solitude begins feeling frightening. Spend enough years consuming other people's thoughts, and generating your own starts requiring unusual effort. Fortunately, the opposite is also true. The brain can relearn, not overnight, not through motivational slogans, but through repeated moments of conscious awareness. Every time you resist reacting immediately, you're teaching your nervous system that urgency isn't always necessary. Every time you sit with uncertainty instead of rushing toward easy conclusions, you're strengthening a different relationship with reality. Every time you choose observation before judgment, you're reclaiming something profoundly human. Maybe wisdom has never been about having better answers. Maybe it's about developing the courage to remain present inside difficult questions. Questions that don't fit neatly into headlines. Questions that cannot be solved by software. Questions that ask who you're becoming instead of what you're achieving. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. If the future becomes increasingly efficient, increasingly automated, increasingly optimized, what qualities will become truly rare? Not intelligence. Machines are already extraordinary at processing information. Not speed. Computers surpassed us long ago. Perhaps the rarest human qualities will be discernment, compassion, humility, and the willingness to pay attention without immediately demanding certainty. Those abilities don't generate viral moments. They grow quietly, almost invisibly, like roots beneath the surface. And maybe that's why they're so easy to overlook. I'm curious where you stand on this. Have you ever felt that slowing down, asking deeper questions, or refusing to follow the crowd made you feel out of place in today's world? Or do you think modern life is simply evolving, and people who struggle with its pace are resisting necessary change? I'd genuinely love to read your perspective in the comments, because conversations like this become meaningful only when different minds are willing to explore them together. The answer may reveal something important, not just about the world we're building, but about the kind of people we're becoming inside it. There is an old illusion that every generation quietly inherits. It tells us that history moves in a straight line, that each breakthrough makes us wiser, that more information naturally creates more understanding. But history has never worked that way. Civilizations have risen while losing sight of the very values that made them possible. Cultures have reached astonishing levels of sophistication while becoming strangely disconnected from themselves. Human beings have built magnificent cities, mapped the stars, split the atom, and connected continents, yet still struggle to answer the simplest question: how should we live? Perhaps that question becomes even more urgent as technology grows more powerful. Artificial intelligence will continue transforming the world. Entire professions will change. Decisions that once required human judgment will increasingly be delegated to machines capable of processing unimaginable amounts of information in seconds. Many people fear that future because they imagine machines replacing human intelligence. That may not be the greatest risk. The greater danger is that we slowly begin imitating machines, not in our abilities, in our priorities, efficiency over reflection, optimization over meaning, prediction over curiosity, performance over presence. The remarkable thing about consciousness is that it cannot be rushed. A meaningful conversation cannot be compressed into an algorithm. Grief refuses to obey productivity metrics. Love does not become deeper because it happens faster. Forgiveness cannot be automated. Wonder cannot be manufactured on demand. The experiences that define a human life unfold according to a rhythm that has remained almost unchanged for thousands of years. A child still learns trust one moment at a time. Friendship still grows through shared attention. Wisdom still arrives long after certainty has disappeared. These are not flaws in the human experience. They are its foundation. There is a reason so many people describe feeling exhausted, even after accomplishing everything they believed they wanted. For years, they climbed the ladder. They worked harder, earned more, collected achievements, built impressive identities. Then one quiet evening, after everyone else had gone home, they discovered something they never expected. The ladder had answered questions they were never truly asking. Success can solve problems. It cannot decide what makes a life meaningful. No promotion can tell you who you are when no one is watching. No algorithm can define your purpose. No amount of public approval can replace private peace. That realization often feels unsettling because it strips away comforting distractions. It leaves you alone with yourself. And many people spend their entire lives trying to avoid that meeting. The ancient philosophers understood solitude differently than we do. To them, being alone was not necessarily loneliness. It was an opportunity. A chance to hear thoughts too quiet for crowded places. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the most powerful empires in history, yet many of his reflections return to the same simple practice. Examining his own mind before attempting to judge the world around him. Not because the world didn't matter, because every perception of the world passed through the filter of his own consciousness. That insight feels surprisingly modern. Today, we spend enormous energy trying to influence external reality. We debate strangers, we defend opinions, we curate identities, we chase trends before they disappear. Yet how often do we pause to examine the lens through which we experience everything else? Have you ever noticed that two people can witness the same event and leave with completely different stories? The event matters, but interpretation shapes experience. That doesn't mean truth is relative. It means perception is powerful, and perception is trainable. Every moment of awareness changes the observer a little. Every honest question weakens unconscious assumptions. Every act of genuine listening expands the boundaries of your world. Perhaps that is what wisdom has always meant. Not accumulating endless knowledge, learning how to see, seeing your own fears before projecting them onto others. Seeing your own desires before allowing them to control you. Seeing your own certainty with enough humility to admit it might be incomplete. Carl Jung believed that the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge do not disappear. They simply express themselves in other ways. Ignored fear becomes anger. Ignored insecurity becomes arrogance. Ignored loneliness becomes endless distraction. Modern culture offers countless opportunities to stay distracted. There is always another video, another notification, another purchase, another controversy, another reason to postpone the uncomfortable work of understanding yourself. Distraction has become one of the most sophisticated luxuries ever created. It asks for very little, only your attention. A few minutes at a time, day after day, year after year. Until one morning you realize that your life has been measured not only by what you experienced, but by what constantly interrupted your experience. Attention is more than a cognitive resource. It is the substance from which your life is built. Whatever consistently receives your attention gradually becomes your reality. If your attention belongs entirely to fear, your world begins shrinking. If it belongs entirely to comparison, nothing you achieve ever feels sufficient. If it belongs entirely to outrage, peace starts feeling unfamiliar. But if even a small part of your attention returns to observation, gratitude, and honest curiosity, something extraordinary begins to happen, not outside you. Inside you, the world remains just as complicated. The headlines continue. Technology keeps advancing. People still disagree. Nothing external has changed, yet your relationship with it has. And sometimes that changes everything. Maybe that is the quiet rebellion our era needs. Not louder voices, clearer minds. Not constant certainty. Greater humility. Not